What's up, guys? I'm Lithex, CEO and founder of Lithex Productions, and today we're going to take a look at how we can make a simple third-person controller with the new Unity input system. What's up, guys? Before we get started, I just wanted to let you know that we are currently in development of a full Udemy course for game design. It's taking a lot of work, but I hope you'll enjoy it as much as I am creating it. The course will be free for our top tier patrons as a huge thanks for the support that you have already given the channel. Um, but without any more, let's just go on ahead and hop into it. So let's pop up Unity here. Okay, now quick disclaimer, and I covered this in the FPS tutorial too, but if you are using the new input system, it will overwrite the old system. So if you're updating an existing project, any code on the old system will no longer work, and that'll need to be fixed too. So in order to do that, we're going to go to Window and Package Manager. Now, once you're in your package manager, this little drop down here that says packages and project, change that to Unity registry. Then we're going to type in our search bar for input, and you'll see your input system here. Highlight that and click install. Now, installing this system, like I said, will overwrite. It's going to pop up a little box here in a second confirming that we want to overwrite the old system. We're just going to say yes. Now that's going to, after it's done importing, it's going to restart your Unity. That's totally okay. It's supposed to happen. And while that comes back up, let's think about how third-person controllers work. So generally, most of the movement is done on the keyboard, right? You have W and S to move forward and back, your Q and E key strafe, um, maybe your A and D key are turning you, right? Sometimes the mouse is what turns, but for this specific tutorial, we're going to do it a little bit more like a, say like World of Warcraft style third-person camera. So to do that, let's hop out of here real quick. All right, we want to start out by creating a 3D plane that we can walk on. Okay, I'm going to call this ground. And I'm going to scale it on every axis by 10. Sweet. Now I'm going to create a cylinder for our player, and we'll just call that player. And we're going to move our player up to 1.6, and we're going to scale it on the Y by 1.6. Sweet. Okay, let's drag our camera under our player. Now let's move our camera roughly into the position that it would be for our camera. This can always be adjusted later. Um, get a better rotation on this thing. Yeah, so something along these lines, right? Can always be tweaked and changed later. Now, let's go on ahead and start putting some of this together. So we're going to come over here and create a new folder for our scripts. And let's create a script, and we'll call it player input. Let's open that up in Visual Studio. Okay, and let's set this up so we remove everything from the middle. We're not using these top two statements. And then we're going to add our namespace. And for this, we'll just do third person controller, new input system tutorial. Okay, then we throw everything on the inside there. Now, in order to use the new input system, we need a new using statement, and it's using Unity engine.input system. because it doesn't actually come standard on the system. Again, since we're going to be moving, we're going to just add this now. We're going to require a component. That's going to be type of character controller. Sweet. Now, we want to create an input action. And I'll show you what that does in just a second. So we'll do serialized field private input action. We'll call it movement. And then let's go ahead and reference our character controller now as well. So we want a private character controller. Let's call it controller. And then we'll create a start function. And inside of our start function, we'll say controller is equal to get component character controller. Okay, so let's save that and let's check out what the input action does. So we'll hop back over into Unity and we'll drag our player input script onto player. Now, if you don't know, when we did require component, that automatically added our character controller. Now, the character controller also acts as a collider, so we can now remove this collider. Perfect. So our input action adds this little box on our script where it says movement. So let's add here. And we can add a 2D vector composite. And the reason we're adding a 2D vector composite is because we move on two different planes while we're walking. We move on the x-axis and the z-axis of the ground. Maybe you're moving on y in your game if you want, and then you could do y and z or y and x. It all depends on your game. But in this case, and in most cases for this type of game, we're going to be moving on the z and x-axis, which is only two axes. So we'll just call this movement. Okay, now on up, to move forward, we're going to press W. So that's our up arrow essentially. Down, we will do S, which is S keyboard. Left. So when we strafe with these types of controllers, we're going to use Q and E for this. You can use A and D, and then we could turn with the mouse if you wanted to. But in this case, I want to strafe with my Q and E. So my left is going to be Q, and my right is going to be E. Awesome. So now let's hop back over into Visual Studio. And let's start putting some of this together. So one of the most important things that you have to do here is enable your movement. You have to enable your input actions, otherwise they won't work at all. And so it's very important that you remember to do this. So we'll do movement dot enable, and you want the function, you do not want the Boolean version. So on disable movement dot disable. Okay, now that we have that, let's go on ahead and make a speed variable. So let's do public float speed. We'll just set it to maybe, let's do 7 for now. It's not that big of a deal. Equals 7. Okay. Now let's create a walk function. So remember we had two axes. Now when we're reading these two axes, it's actually reading only x and y, but we want to move on x and z. So in order to do this, we're going to create our float x and set that to the x-axis. So that's going to be movement dot read value, and we're going to read the vector 2, and we want the x position. Now we're going to create a float z, but this time we're going to read movement dot read value vector 2, and we're going to grab that y position, and we're going to use it as our z. And so what that's doing is it's reading our W, S, E, and Q keys. So our E and Q are on the x-axis, our W and S are on the y-axis, but we're going to make that Z. So in order to do that, we're going to create a vector 3. We'll call it direction. And we'll set that equal to transform dot right times x plus transform dot forward times z. Okay. So transform dot forward is moving on our x-axis, where all our local x-axis essentially. So it's this says returns a normalized vector representing the blue axis of the transform in world space, but this is always going to keep us moving forward relative to where our character's facing. So now we need to actually move, right? So let's do controller.move, and we'll move in our direction times our speed times time.delta time. Okay. Now we need to create an update function so we can actually start doing this. So update, and then we'll just throw our walk function in there. Perfect. So let's save that, and let's hop back over into Unity. And in order to see that we're actually moving, I'm going to click on our ground and right click and create a cube. Now, actually, you know what? Let's not do that because it makes it very big. Let's do it on the outside first. So let's create a cube so we don't take the ground scale. Reset the transforms. I'm just going to lift it up a little bit and pull it to the side. Okay. Now, I'm going to hit Control D to duplicate. Control D. Control D. Control D. Okay. Reposition that a bit. Awesome. Now I'm just going to click these, hold Shift to select them all, and drag them all under my ground. And I'll rename them all at once to obstacle. Perfect. Now, let's hop into play and check if our movement's working. So look at that. W to go forward, S to move backwards, Q to strafe, E to strafe. And if you hold them both, you'll go in a diagonal direction. And the cool thing about when you move in a diagonal direction, normally you have to normalize these. Well, with the new input system, they're already normalized, so you don't actually have to do that. You can tell that I'm not gaining any extra speed by moving at an angle. So that works great. So now we need to implement some turning. Now to do our turning, let's hop back into Visual Studio, and we want to add another input action. So let's do serialized field private input action, and we'll call this turning. And let's hop back into Unity real quick and think about how this is going to work. So if you put your A and D as your strafe key, then on your turning, you could add a binding if you wanted to turn with your mouse. You would add a binding, and then you would add mouse delta. So delta mouse right here. That's what you would add, okay? And then you would read a vector 2 and apply that to your rotations. However, that's not what we will be doing. We are actually going to delete this. We're going to be moving with our A and D key on this tutorial. So I'm going to add a 1D axis composite because I'm only testing on one axis. We're going to go a negative and we're going to go a positive, right? So our negative or left is going to be A, and our positive is going to be D. Awesome. Now that we have that, we can hop back over into Visual Studio and we can start putting some of this to work. So because we're using our A and D key, we can't use a vector 2 or a vector 3 when we're reading it. So we're going to have to do something a little bit different. But before we do that, let's create a public float turn speed, and we'll just set it to 100 for now. Public float turn speed equals 100. Okay. We want to add our turning in here. So turning dot enable and turning dot disable. Okay. We'll add turning into our update function. Oh, wait, we don't want to add turning in there. We want to create our turning function. So let's do private void turn. Okay. And we'll add turn in here. Sweet. Now we're all set up and ready to go. So let's start putting this function to work. Again, like I said, we're only moving on one axis now. So in order to do this, we're actually going to be rotating along the y-axis, right? So let's do float y equals turning dot read value, and we're going to read the float. Okay, so it's either going to be a positive number or a negative number, all right? And we actually want to multiply this by our mouse, or not our mouse, our turn sensitivity. So that's our turn speed, and then times time dot delta time. Okay, so now we have our y, and we're going to do transform. So we're going to grab the object that this script is attached to, and we're going to rotate. And we want to rotate on vector 3, vector 3 up times y. Okay. And let's save that and hop into Unity and hit play. So we can move forward and backwards with W and S, strafe with Q and E, and turn side to side with A and D. Perfect. Now, just to show you that you are actually facing in the right direction, I'm going to create a cube underneath our player. I'm going to hit F to focus that cube, scroll back, scale this down and in, and then I'll position it like it's a hat. Okay. Now let's hit play. And if you notice, that hat is staying in front of me. I know it's kind of hard to see there because everything's matching colors, but just run over to the edge here. And there you have it, our third person controller. That's it. Man, I can't wait to see what you guys start doing with this new input system. I'm actually kind of enjoying it. I'm curious to hear what you guys think of this system, so let me know in the comments below because I'm very curious on what types of things you think are maybe easier, or maybe it's too hard, or maybe it's too big of a change at once. So I definitely want to know that. And also in the comments below, please let me know what other types of videos you guys would like to start seeing on the channel. After all, these videos really are for you guys, and I really want to make sure that you're getting the content that you're looking for. Um, I don't want to just have a bunch of random nonsense on here that you don't really care about. So I would definitely want to make sure that it's things that you guys like. Also, big thanks to my Patreons this month. You guys are really helping out the channel. And if you aren't a Patreon and you still want to support the channel, just hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, participate in the comments. It actually helps so much with the YouTube algorithm and helping get the videos in front of more people to grow our community so we can all keep creating together. Um, just it's so crazy how fast we've been growing, and thank you guys so much for all that you've been doing. And until next time, peace.